And it's weird because I remember buckling her up in the car seat from the hospital, and I was like driving like 1 mile an hour, and people were flipping me off and passing me. Get off the road, you stupid! And we just didn't know what we were doing. And
Yeah.
I was 35 years old.
Welcome to the Fatherhood Chronicles, where we're on mission to discover what it takes to be the best fathers.
Today's interviewee is going to bring a new belief structure on what he thinks it takes to build an incredible family. And it starts with putting God as the number one priority in your life, followed by your wife. Your kids come third after your wife. Then it's the church. And last but not least, you put your work as the fifth most important thing in your life.
Now, just a little refresher on last episode, our guest left us with the advice that you should prioritize your wife, number one, spend time with her. And in that, he really believes that that's what will make you a really good father. I'm Caleb.
And I'm Logan.
All right, Mike. So thank you for coming on again. So would you tell the folks that are listening at home a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Mike Alexander. I'm officially an old guy in my 50s.
Woohoo!
Yeah, I've been married to my wife for about 17 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Uh, have a daughter, Reagan, who's 16, and a son, Jaden, who's 14.
Okay.
We've been in the area for quite a while. Born and raised here.
So when did you guys have Reagan, your first? How old were you?
I was 35.
35.
Yeah.
So you guys started a little bit later?
Yeah, Jen's about 8 years younger than me, but yeah, I definitely started younger. And it's funny because I have a twin brother, and he had kids fairly young, like probably in his early 20s. And so it's kind of neat to see the difference in how we raise our kids.
Yeah, I bet.
But I just, it was really a blessing for me because God really was working on my maturity in all areas of my life. And I mean, I applaud you guys, you young guys having kids. Um, I'm not saying it's right and I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying for me, it was the timing was God's timing. And it was really good for me because I was not even close to being mature enough to raise kids.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So you're married. How old were you?
Wow.
So you're married. How long have you been married, and how old were you when you got married?
I was about actually I was married when I was 35. Jen and I did it the right way. We waited till we were married, and we got pregnant instantly. Um, and it was really special because before that I was not really a Christian, so I was doing all kinds of things that I was trying to please myself, and I got myself into a lot of trouble and just was very empty and I kind of got to the point where I was just destitute. Life was just meaningless to me. I didn't want to exist. And I remember the day I cried out. It was pouring down rain, and I cried out, and I'm like, man, if you're real, I'm going to follow you till my last breath. And it was like instantly my life started to just become repaired. And that's when I met Jen. And Jen was I met her because I was trying to find a church. And they're like, oh, go to that girl. She's a Bible thumper. And I went over to her and I said, hey, is there a good church? I heard you might have a good church. And she's like looking at me like, nice pickup line, slime ball. And I'm like, hey man, I'm just looking for a church. And I walked off, and she wrote down the address and said, here, if you want to go to a church. And I started just going, and I was going just to learn about Jesus, and her and I became better friends, and she was my spiritual mentor, and that's how we started our relationship. But yeah, we didn't date for very long. We were kind of like we knew after we liked each other and that we were going to be together that um, we're just not wired to be celibate. So we didn't have like a long engagement because
Yep.
we wanted to do it right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good.
So we got pregnant with Reagan on our wedding night.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's
That's
like 9 months
really
later, bam. Yeah.
So your wife was kind of the spiritual leader in your house when you guys got together. Is that still the case, or has that shifted?
You know, if you were asking her, she would probably say it shifted just because I just have grabbed tight so hard of the Lord. And I mean, she's still, I think she's the best preacher that I've ever listened to. I mean, she's got so much spiritual wisdom, and I still learn from her, but she's just, it just works for us because I'm still on fire for Jesus almost 20 years later, and just haven't forgot that part of my life that I was like, I don't want to live anymore. And God's like, just trust me, do it my way, and it's going to be much better than your way. And he was right. So
That's awesome.
it's really been good for me. And then, I can kind of, when you're talking about fatherhood, I mean, that's kind of the root of it. When I see you young guys with babies and stuff, and Caleb, you're the newest of the dads, right?
Yep.
You're like, man, life's great. But there's going to be a time where you just hit a brick wall and you're like, is this really what it's all about? And you have to lay it down to the Lord, and he'll just walk you through it, man. Because it's not all rainbows and unicorns.
Yeah. I'm already seeing that.
Yeah, yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. But absolutely the best thing ever, having children.
So, changing gears here, what do you do for work?
Well, that's interesting. My wife and we have several businesses. I'm kind of entrepreneurial in spirit.
Yeah.
Since I was a little kid, I was always selling something. Our three main businesses are we have a promotional company, Standout Promotion, and we do everything from business cards to print T-shirts to wrap vehicles to make signs. We've been doing that since about 2006. We have an irrigation company, so we do a lot of irrigation, sprinkle irrigation, and we also have a convenience store and an RV park.
Oh.
So
Wow.
that's we're very diversified. We've got a couple other smaller businesses that we're working on, but we're just both very entrepreneurial.
Mm-hmm.
And God has just really blessed us too, because I'm too stupid to make anything work right without his help.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that's 4 businesses, and you're business owners for 4 different, or
Yeah, I mean, I have a partnership with somebody else with a land company where we purchase land and we develop land. And then Jen just launched a new business this last summer, like a property rental management business where she manages VRBOs and Airbnbs and stuff. So she thought she didn't have enough to do, and she just got her real estate license. So
Okay.
so a total of 6 businesses that you guys are invested in.
according to the IRS, there's 6.
Yes.
I love that.
Yep.
Make sure
yep.
they never see this.
Yeah, exactly.
So you explained how you had your first kids in your late 30s. If you had a choice with your knowledge now, would you have had kids younger, or do you like the time frame that you chose to have kids?
Well, it's kind of like I said, at my point in my life, I wasn't ready. Now, if I would have had Jesus, because I think it's great that young families, I don't necessarily think you have to wait till you're 30 years old or wait till you graduate from college to get married and have kids. I'm not like that. I don't go advise people like wait till you're this age. I mean, I think that I think the conditions are you following the Lord? Do you have a plan, and are you going to stick it out for the long haul?
Mhm.
Because I think one of the problems with marriage it's so disposable to people. Like, if it doesn't work, it's okay. I mean, 50% of people get a divorce. And I'm not saying anything bad. Sometimes it's not even sometimes there's one party that really wants to make it work and the other party's like, I'm out. I mean, there's nothing you can do, right?
Yep.
But I think that if you prepare for the long haul, I think it's fine to have children when you're young. I do advise people to try to get married before they have children. Doesn't always work, but you know, just I just think it, first comes love, then comes marriage, the
Yep.
baby carriage.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think I like that plan. Doesn't always work. It doesn't mean that if you're not on that plan, God's not going to bless you and anoint your um, fatherhood and your life as a husband. I don't believe that either. But I just think things are a little bit easier when you do it that way.
So you're a follower of Christ now. What did you think of religion or Christ or God? Did you believe when you were younger? Did you have any past, like, did your parents believe? Did you have any grandparents or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I was raised Catholic in an Italian Catholic family, so pretty strong Catholics.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not bashing on Catholicism at all. I just didn't have the relationship with Jesus as a Catholic. I don't know how much you guys know about Catholicism, but for me, I was really good at the rituals. I was a really good altar boy when I was a kid, um, but I just never had that relationship with Jesus, and I didn't exactly know what that meant. That's one of the things that Jen really helped me with is that relationship, um, and making him the most important thing in your life, which is really hard when you're married and you have kids. It was funny because when Jen and I were first married, I'd always tell her, but I love Jesus more. And it would just make her so angry. I'd go, hey, I really love you, Jen, but I love Jesus more. And it, when you have kids and you think that you're going to love Jesus more than your kids, that's hard to kind of in your head think through, right? I mean, have you guys ever thought that? Like, I love him more than I love her. And um, I think that's hard for people, but that's just where I'm at. And
I had it today with my daughter. I told her, I was like, hey, did you know I love you? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, but do you know who I love more? And I was like, your mom. And then I was like, do you know who I love more than your mom? Jesus. And I'm like, that's hard when you look at your kid and say that you love Jesus more when in that moment you're like,
or even I think a lot of people would never put their spouse above their children.
yep. I stand by that
And
very firmly.
and that's the order, right? The
Yep.
order is Jesus, your spouse, your children. And if you have a marriage that is not really healthy, I just remember a colleague that I worked with that was like her children were exponentially higher in value than her husband. And I was like, man, and she didn't have Jesus either. So you don't understand that order.
And whenever I explain it, I always say your kids. I can't remember who told me this, but somebody said your kids are out on loan. They're on loan from Jesus. You get them for 18 years, then they get to go make their own decision. You chose to
Absolutely.
be with your wife for the rest of your life. She's not on loan. She's with you to the day you die.
That's great. And it's a great honor that the Lord gives us to to be a steward of those kids.
Yep.
But you're right, when we marry our kids off, when they get married, they're not us, and they're one with their new spouse. And that's really hard. And you're right. And we're gonna be with our spouse. I mean, there's a time you're gonna be an empty nester. I know you guys aren't thinking that, but I'm counting the days down. I'm just kidding. But you don't when you're younger. You're like, man, you think 30 years into the future is like 1,000 years, and then you ask somebody my age, and you're like, wow, it just flew by. And it was, uh, but but you're right. That order of just, you know, loving the Lord, then loving your spouse, then loving your kids. It's I think it's okay to tell your kids that. I think it's okay to tell your daughters when they're little like that order. It doesn't mean that the value of love is not a high level of love. Of course, I mean, you would give anything for your children. But I think that order is very important.
I think it helps with respect too. Your kids will see that you love their mom more than you love them, and so it'll pass down to them that they need to respect. They respect that, and I think it shows more respect that your parents love each other. I think that that's just
And it's incredibly important with daughters because it teaches your daughters what they should be looking for in a man. A
yep,
man should respect her above anyone except God.
yep.
Yeah, I really would advise you guys as fathers, young fathers of daughters, that you have to train your daughters on what man they need to pick, right? Because my daughter is a teenager, and teenage daughters are hard because they go through lots of stuff and they're going through hormonal things, and things are tough. But you know what? You got to remind them that they've got one shot at picking the right dude, and it can't be this guy. It can't be the superficial guy. The guy looks really good with his shirt off, but he's a sleazeball. He doesn't have a job. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
You've got to start training them, like you said, Caleb. You got to start training them to think that, like, hey, a real guy's going to open the door for you. A real guy's going to take you out on a date and he's going to pay.
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of things. And you just, I tell my daughter all the time, I'm like, Reagan, you got to find somebody that makes a lot of money because you spend money, and you just need to find a husband that makes a lot of money. Because if you find and I'm partially, it's tongue in cheek, but partially it's not, because
Yep.
she has a standard of living that she wants to have. And if she marries a deadbeat that doesn't provide for her, then she's going to be miserable.
Mhm.
So you got to plant those seeds early, man.
Yeah.
How is that going for you as you're at that stage with your daughter? She's just about to dating and long-term relationship stage.
Well, it's good because I mean she's going to be 17 this summer, and I can't imagine her doing things that I did when I was 17. I was a little heathen, man. I was out on it, and I lived a lifestyle that was so completely different than her lifestyle. I mean, she's in a private Christian school, and I'm not suggesting that she's perfect. She's not. She's a sinner just like we are, right? But she's pretty good, and she's on track, and she has the struggles that young teenagers have. Um, but it's pretty good, and I get along with her well because I give her space, and I know that the hardest thing you're going to do is watch your kids fall on their face. But I'm just finishing the book of James, and I love the book of James because the first part of it talks about all of the challenges that we have and how it builds spiritual maturity. And your parents, if you've ever heard, they're like, "Well, that builds character," and all those hard things. But it's true. And when we go through really hard, difficult things that you never want your kid to go through, it's okay.
Hmm.
Jen, on the other hand, has a really hard time watching her kids go through things where they fall on their face. And sometimes I'm like, look, they need to fall on their face. I know it stinks, but it's going to build the spiritual maturity. And I can pull it right out of the word, James 1 2, right? And I can see it right there. God's word is like, I mean, either you believe all of the word, or you believe none of the word. It's not like you're just picking and choosing
Yep.
things.
I love that. When it ties very closely to having young kids too, because you're at the point where your kids are going to fall on their face from their mistakes, and as young kids you have to, like, I have conversations with my wife when my kids literally fall on their face walking, and you can't coddle them, and it goes the
Yeah.
same thing. You guys are just at an emotional maturity stage where it's completely different.
I remember I used to tell my kids when they were little, like your kids, I'm like, what's my number one job? And they would say, to keep me safe, Dad. Well, and that was the answer. I'm like, I'm going to keep you safe, right? but they're still kids. We went camping once. Jaden was probably 3, 4 years old, and you know the grills that you have in the campgrounds.
Oh yeah.
We had that thing roasting, getting real hot because we were gonna cook steaks or something on it. And I said, "Don't touch this. Don't touch this." Okay. Well, little kids, don't touch means, well, I'm gonna just kind of touch. Well, he grabbed a hold of that thing, and it burnt the lines in his hand. He
Oh.
screamed all. I mean, he was screaming all night. Some campers next door came over and they're like, "Hey, we've got a first aid kit," and but you know, I tried to do my job and keep him safe, but kids still, I mean, even when you tell them not to touch, they're going to touch it
Yeah.
once in a while.
It builds character.
Builds character. That's right.
Okay, so you've got some really strong foundations on being a father, and you waited until your 30s to have kids, but it's really cool hearing this. I'm super curious, what was it like growing up for you then? What was your father like? Did you have mentors? Like, what was your role model for fatherhood?
Well, my dad, he was a Great Depression kid, so he kind of grew up in the 30s. He's still alive. I think he's going to be 89 this summer.
Wow.
Um, but that era was different in being a father. It was like you kind of you supported the family. You didn't really necessarily do things like take them camping, and you really didn't go to the sporting events because you were working, and you really didn't give him a hug and say, "Hey, I love you, son." That just didn't really happen in my house.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean that he didn't love me.
Mhm.
I mean, and my father made a lot of mistakes as a father, and my brother still resents him for the things that happened, and I'm like, you've got to forgive him. And he's a much better grandfather than he is a father, right? But you guys have probably heard sometimes parents, they just do, if they had it to say, they'd go, "I did the best I could." And I really believe that most parents do the best they can, but it's a different generation. Like my kids, I tell them I love them so many times a day. They're like, "Whatever, dude. Whatever, bruh." It's, they're like, "Whatever, bruh." Uh, um, but I can look back at my dad and respect that he worked really hard to feed us, because when when your kid, if you guys ever have boys, you're not gonna have any.
Nope.
If you ever have a boy, when they turn
Hoping so.
14, they consume more food than you can possibly imagine. Jen is like, "Were you like that?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, we jug I mean, we we bought gallons of milk that we just blew through, and steaks and hamburger. And my son is an eating machine, right? So I value that my father worked really hard to give us as much as they could give us.
Hmm.
Um, and my parents stayed married. And there were times I look back and I'm like, wow, I can't believe they stayed married through that. And there were some really rocky roads. And I look at them now, and they grew old together, and they get to die with each other, right? And it's pretty remarkable. So I could still look at them and go, okay, I don't necessarily want to be a father the way my dad was, but I sure as heck want to emulate him in the fact that he raised his kids, got them all out of the house, and he's with his spouse till the last days of his life.
Hmm.
And I think that's good. Now, in the Italian Catholic world, here's what you do. Your cheesters, you know what a cheester is?
Mm-mm.
It's people that go to church on Christmas and Easter.
Oh, yeah.
They're cheesters
Okay, I like
until they're about in their 70s, mid 70s. Then they start really hammering the church,
that.
because the time you're at the end of your rope, and they're like, I gotta make it. I gotta get my golden ticket. So it's funny because I never remember my dad going to church, and now he goes to church every Sunday, like just like my grandfather did before my grandfather passed. Did the same thing. He was a cheester until he was in his mid 70s, and then he started going to church. um, and he really recognizes that I have a different spiritual walk than him, whenever we go up there for dinner, he's like, let Mike pray because he knows I'm a Bible thumper, and he really respects that. You know,
That's cool.
he doesn't believe everything that's in the Bible, which is really strange. Um, I remember talking to him. I went to Israel a few years ago, and I went to a spot, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's where Jesus was there, and Peter cut off the guy's ear, and my dad's like, oh, I don't believe all that stuff, and I'm like, yeah, it's just different,
Hmm.
but he at least respects my my faith.
Yeah.
That's a cool relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
So, who do you have any boys or guys that you've mentored yourself?
You know, I think so. I've raised a lot of entrepreneurs in the area that have worked for me, that I've helped with business, and but I think more than anything, I try to be a disciple more,
Hmm.
because I think the root of everything in your happiness is Him, you know. And um, I love the verse. It's not by our power or might, but it's by the Spirit.
Hmm.
And and I always tell people, um, you're trying to figure everything out on your own, and you just need to let Him drive the bus for you. So most of my advice to young people, and I've had a lot of young people, and it's hard because I always tell Logan this: your guys' age group is a hard age group because you think you know everything, and I did too when I was your age. I was like, oh, dude, just shut up, right? Um, but sometimes you just got to go, wow, that old person has some wisdom. And sometimes you look at people and you don't even realize how much wisdom they have if you just took the time to listen. I mean, I should be going to nursing homes and talking to old people because I just walk out with these little morsels of wisdom all the time from them. Um, but when I try to mentor young people, that's kind of the approach I take. I'm like, look, make him first. Um, Try to not be prideful. My
Yep.
kids, when my kids are prideful, we're all prideful at times.
Yep.
I'm always like, hey, remember that scripture? Exalt yourself and you'll be humbled, or humble yourself and you'll be exalted. And they roll their eyes and go, whatever, bruh, and walk off. But at some point, they're gonna go, yeah,
Hmm.
I need to humble myself more.
That's
Did
cool.
I answer your question, Caleb?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then let me ask, as we get to this point in your story
Yeah.
with your kids, you've seen almost through adulthood now in raising kids, and you've got kids right at the cusp. What was your favorite stage developmentally for your kids?
Man, I like them when they're little, when they're just learning how to walk and talk, and it's such a great age, and it goes by so quickly. Um, but their personalities are developing, and it's just awesome because part of their personality is going to come from you, and part of it's going to come from your spouse, and part of it's just going to be what God made them into. And it's so cool. Like, Caleb, your little one's a couple weeks old, right? So that at 2 weeks old, there's no personality, but like your girls, I mean, Reagan, when she loves your kid, and she's like, "Oh, Dad, you should have seen him," and and she tells me all the stories, and I love that age. Um, this might sound cliche. I love every stage, um, because I was watching my son play basketball in his game last night, and I'm like, he he's really into weightlifting, and as a 14-year-old, he's pretty developed compared to
Hmm.
his little friends. I mean, he's got definition in his chest and his arms and legs, and he's pretty tall, and his friends are little, and their voice are they're Jaden, your mom's good looking, kind of squeaky still.
That's a good example.
And Jaden's kind of like, yeah, I know, I know, bro. And I like all the stages, but man, just those are so precious when you've got the little ones, and you kind of take, you probably know this already, Logan, you take them for granted because you blink. And I mean, the good thing about you is you got 3 shots at it, right? You're like, oh, I got 2 more chances at this.
Yep.
um, but yeah, I like the little ones. I like the little guys.
Yeah. It's fun.
I'm trying to. That's one thing that when my wife was pregnant, I was trying to enjoy the stages of pregnancy, and it was going by pretty quick until like the last 2 months. I was like, okay, it's time. And the last month, and I'm like, and then she was 5 days late, so I'm like, oh my word, this is the worst wait ever. But I'm just trying to enjoy, our time together for the last time, and now I want Aspen, our daughter, to start, just engaging with us, but I'm trying to enjoy this baby stage. It's hard to. Everyone says enjoy it, but how do you do that if you don't know how? Like if you just how do you just enjoy it?
Well, I think that real infancy is just hard because, I mean, at this point, I remember when Reagan was first born and they kind of let us go out of the hospital. I'm like, they're really just going to cut us loose? We don't know what the hell we're doing. Right?
Yeah.
And it's weird because I remember buckling her up in the car seat from the hospital, and I was like driving like 1 mile an hour, and people were flipping me off and passing me. Get off the road, you stupid! And we just didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah.
And I was 35 years old, and that's the whole process, man.
Right.
God just gives you that knowledge, and you know what, you make mistakes, and when they get sick, you I mean, luckily you guys have Google, right? You got YouTube and all this stuff, and I mean, when Reagan was born, I just got the first version of the iPhone. I remember I was on the waiting list and I just got it, and you would pull open the internet, but there wasn't that much stuff like there is now.
Yeah.
So we would rely on, okay, we got a baby, she feels like she's hot. We'd go run down to the Walgreens and get the thermometer and take her temperature, and then we'd start calling parents. Mom, what do we do? Reagan's temperature is this, and Mom would walk you through it, and you just learn.
Yeah.
And those are valuable times too. When they start when they start walking and actually talking, then it's really cool because they just depend on you, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to make really hard decisions like, okay, I need to put my baby to bed, but she's going to cry. And then is you and your wife, you got to come to some agreements. You're going to go, look, are you going to cave in and go pick her up? And then, because that's the worst thing you can do, guys.
Yep.
I mean, my advice, read Baby Wise. We let Reagan cry, and she cry. And then after about 2-3 weeks, she slept all through the night. She knew if she cried, we weren't going to come running.
Mm-hmm.
But those stages. They're all really important, and they're all just things that you're like. I mean, I was holding a baby not too long ago, and I'm like, Jen, I want another baby, and she was like, "You're nuts, man." But because I missed that infancy stage, you know what I mean? So value it, but it's not necessarily my favorite stage because they're just not. There's no personalities yet.
At least with Dad, I would say. I think Mom, because they still have that connection.
Yeah, Mom. Yeah, exactly. And
Because
if
my wife's enjoying it.
and if they're nursing,
I love it, but
is your wife nursing?
yeah.
Yeah, then you really got that bond.
Yep.
No, careful. My wife gets pissed off because our 1-year-old's nursing, and she still comes to me every second she can. So my wife gets irritated that she only is useful for one thing to our 1-year-old.
That's funny. That's funny.
I like your question. I'm curious if you think the same thing. For me, people have told me all my life, like, enjoy that infant stage because it's so short, and it's one of those things that, like, as you're walking through it, it's kind of hard as a dad, and it's not until it's gone that you actually notice.
Yep.
Like, it was just one of those things that I was like, oh, this sucks. I can't sleep. I have a baby. I have all this, and then you blink, and you got a 1-year-old who's walking around now, and you're like, boy, I used to, like, change your butt, and you fit in my one hand.
Yeah. I know. I remember we had our kids skiing very young, like 2, 3 years old, skiing, and I hated skiing because all I did was pack 3 sets of ski boots, 3 sets of skis, and I was a pack mule. And then once I skied, I had them on harnesses, so I actually never skied myself. And I remember the last time I unhooked the harness on Jaden, and I'm like, he's doing it. He's doing it all by himself.
Mm.
And for about 6 years, I didn't ever have ski poles because I always had the harness. And then then I ski now with my son, and I see people with harnesses, and I miss doing. I mean, I used to catapult them and sling them, and I have good memories of even that stage. But yeah, you're kind of always waiting for that next step. Like I just said, I'm like counting the days down that Reagan goes off to college, but her her mom and I are going to be traumatized at her graduation. We're going to be the people back there that can't keep it together.
Yeah.
Because we're like, we lost our baby.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see all of our snowboarding stuff when you walked in? It's all right outside
Oh,
this door.
that's funny.
So we've got the kids' little snowboards. We had a hard time with it. My wife and I, we wanted every time we go. It's the same thing, right? We're harnessing our kids, we're taking them, and so we got invited to go, and we got sitters for our kids, and we almost felt selfish going without our kids for us to go for a day, and we were like, we should be bringing our kids, but we know that if we bring our kids, we're on one hill the entire time because they're 3 and 4. So like it's harness. We walk. We'll walk the whole bunny hill holding them with the harness. We can't even because snowboarding's hard to harness.
Yeah.
And so we walk down in a harness, and we were like, we had a hard time because we wanted the time to ourselves. But it's like you feel selfish as a parent taking time to yourself.
You do, but you need to do that. Um, there's an old saying: you can fall in love with somebody, but you could also fall out of love with somebody. And if you don't make your wife special, because there's just times where you're like, man, I don't know, she's bugging me. I think if you approach it like, look, it's a covenant that I'm making with her. It's a covenant between God and her and I. So if I am not part of this covenant, it's like I'm just breaking his rules. And if you have that approach and just know there's going to be times that are highs and times that are lows, and it always gets better. When it's bad, it always gets better, and it's the ultimate compromise. People always say, well, if she gives 50% and I give 50%, we're golden. And I'm like, no, you have to give 100%. She has to give 100%. There's not a 50-50, dude.
Yeah.
It's 100 and 100. That's how you make it work.
So what is the greatest lesson you've learned about being a father?
I think the greatest lesson is that I'm a steward of God's children. Those are God's children, and I'm just a steward, and it's a big responsibility. And it's what gets you to get up every morning and go to work when you don't want to, to be the provider. It's the person that's like today was the history fair. And I'm like, I don't really want to go to the history fair. But you go, right? Because they're looking to see if you're there.
Yep.
Right? And I went there and I was like, because I'm older, I can't hear, and I couldn't hear anything, but I just had to be there, and I had to have the right facial expression. So when they saw me, they were like, Dad really likes this, So yeah, as stewards of those kids, it's a great responsibility, and it doesn't end when they leave, right? Because until your last breath, I mean, my dad, like I said, he's going to be 89, and I really listen to him for little bits of wisdom because I know his time is almost done. I mean, he's far outlived the average age of a male. And so every time I see him, I've got to just capture something that I could pass down to my kids, because that's what my job is, right? My job is to be a steward of those kids until my last breath. Now, when my kids go off and get married, it's it's the spouses have to they become one, right? God says we become like a cord.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm still the dad, and that just doesn't go away.
Yeah.
You never go away as being a dad, but I gotta ask you a real question real quick, Mike. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Who's your favorite kid?
In all honesty, I couldn't do it.
I didn't think so.
I just can't. I mean, my kids are so different too. Are your kids all really different?
100%. Every single one.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's so weird how different they can be, and and I just see special things in each one of them.
Do you notice how different but how similar your kids are
Yeah,
too?
yeah.
That's what I have a hard time with is I'm like, you're just like each other, but you're so not.
And I'm really blessed because my kids like each other. Like some siblings, like my twin brother and I, we just beat the hell out of each other. I mean, we did. We literally physically would just terrorize each
Yep.
other, and we weren't really that close, and we're still not really close. I mean, we love each other, but it's like we're not going to hang out.
Hmm.
Um, and my kids hang out. Now, my daughter bosses my son around. She's like, "Come on, we're gonna go to Target." He's like, "I don't want to go to Target." "Come on, we're going to Target." And he'll jump in the car and go to Target.
Bro.
Bro, come on, bro, what's up? Exactly.
That speaks a lot, though, that she wants him to go with her.
Yeah, I'm just blessed that they do hang out and they like each other. I mean, they still siblings are always gonna, butt heads, but
Yeah.
for the most part, they're pretty good friends.
So then they're really close and you like seeing them spend time together. Do you have a favorite memory per kid? Like just one thing that really sticks out over the last decade of each kid?
Um, well, my greatest memory with my daughter was, do you guys remember the Nickelodeon show, The Fresh Beat Band?
It rings a bell, but not.
It was really big. It was this TV show, and Reagan would watch it, and they would sing and dance. And there was about 6 or 7 of them, and they were probably in their, like your guys' age now. And they would go put on concerts. They had a tour. So they went to Spokane. And I mean, they packed the Coliseum. This place was packed, and we were in the furthest nosebleed seats in the very top. And I told Jen, I'm going to bring Reagan down to the front. We're going to sneak up front. And Jen's like, whatever. So I take her, and there was a couple empty seats right up front. Well, every concert, they would pick somebody, a kid out of the concert, to go up and sing and dance and wear a silver coat and be the, I forget what they call it. And this girl comes down, and she's kind of like with a pencil and a clipboard, and she's like, and I think she thought I was like a single father. I think she felt sorry for her. And she's like, she goes up to Reagan and she goes, "Do you want to go backstage?" And Reagan's like, "Yeah." And we went back there. They all come over off stage. They had a little break. They taught her the dance moves. And she goes out on stage on the Coliseum, and this place is jam packed. I mean, there's not an empty seat in the house, except for the 2 seats we had. I don't know. I think they went to the bathroom. But
That's awesome.
I'm texting on my phone. I'm like, "We're backstage," and Jen's like, "What?" And I'm like, "We made it on." And that was just a great memory. She got the coat. She got the pictures with them, and that was probably my best memory with Reagan. It was just like a once in a lifetime thing.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
And it was funny because we have a friend, her and her daughter showed up, and I think there was a lot of animosity that Reagan had the silver jacket, got up on stage. And with my son, I just have so many really good memories. One of my best memories was just recently. He's like, "Hey, Dad, do you think I could start shaving?" And I said, "Well, let me look." And I said, "Yeah, you got some, he had some little hair on his lip." And I was just like, "Wow." He came to me, and I said, "Okay." So we went to the store, and I got him a razor, got him some shaving cream, taught him how to shave. You're gonna go. You got to be careful. Be careful around your lip. And that's when you're like, wow, he's becoming a man.
Mm.
And he came to me.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah. Wow.
yeah,
That's a huge win.
yeah. Getting
Especially
teary-eyed.
at his age, because he has more access to technology than we do.
Yeah,
So it speaks volumes on your relationship
Yeah.
with him.
and that's where I wish I could have had that kind of relationship with my dad.
Yeah.
But it was just a different generation. You just didn't do that.
Yep.
You just figured it
Unapproachable.
out on your own.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like our age was close to the generation that their relationships got better, but I didn't have my father, and so I remember like learning how to shave from YouTube, and like that was how it was for me. Like, and Nate was in the picture at the time, but Nate and I didn't have a relationship when I was
Yeah.
to the point that I should start. And I remember going to YouTube, and at like 18 or something, I had a relationship with Nate, and I was like, I've never asked another guy about shaving. Can I just ask if I'm doing this right? I've been doing it for like 3 years, 4 years at that point, wrong. And Nate was like, well, I do it this way. And I was like, cool. All right. Like, it's
Yeah.
different, the relationship. It's super cool that you have that with him.
Yeah. And when you watch your kids go through puberty and that, it's I don't know with you guys if it was a hard time. It was a hard time for me. And you're just trying to figure out what's going on in your body, and your feelings and your emotions are all, that's hard. And I think that's when you need a dad. Daughters need dads going through that too. I mean, when your daughter has her first period and you walk them through that, and they realize that, hey, look, that's the way it is. That's the way God made you, and it's going to last for a long time, and it's not a big shocker. It's not like we're shocked. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm terrified for it. I know it's going to happen. I'm terrified for when I get that.
Yeah, those are
Dad, where's mom?
those are but even then it's like, you watch your daughters become young women, and it's remarkable. It's as you guys get older, it's like you're gonna go, wow, just it went by quick. Life goes by really, and that's really cliche too. You hear it from people all the time. Well, you're gonna just blink and your life's gonna be over. But it is. I mean, I look at my 89-year-old father, and I remember when he was my age, and it just seems like yesterday. And I'm like, man, I'm gonna be dead statistically in less than 25 years. Okay? Statistically, I'm going to be dead in like 20 years. So I got 20 more years. Statistically.
Mm-hmm.
I could be dead tomorrow. I could last till I'm 100. But I've got to make every day count.
Yeah.
Because it goes by quick.
Yeah, it's crazy. We have Snapchat, and there's memories that from however long you've had the app that'll come up if you have a memory for that day. And my wife I've known her for 9 years already. And that's crazy because it just feels like last year was 2015 when I met them.
Yeah.
And yeah, it goes by quick. And I had another memory. Me and my buddy bought dirt bikes. It was our dream, and we bought them finally. And that was 7 years ago. And I just sent that to him yesterday, and we're like, dude, that felt like it was blink, and we're all old now.
And what's cool is you guys get all these, like, you have all these electronic phones and Snapchats and all this. And, like, I don't have very many pictures of me when I was little or when I was, because, your parents had Polaroids and they took pictures. But if you were I was the fourth kid of 6 kids in my.
Wow.
So by the time they got to my brother and I, they were like, yeah, taking pictures, it's over. It's kind of like when you have the binky and you drop the binky on your first kid, you go wash it every time you drop it, and by the third kid you're like, 20-second rule. Not even the 5-second rule, the 20-second rule.
Right.
Stick it in your mouth.
Builds character.
Builds character. Exactly.
So we're getting pretty close to the end of the show here, and I want to just shift into a couple questions of advice. in particular heading towards younger guys, I think it's incredibly important to hand off advice. One thing for me in particular, I am a quick temper, and I don't know if you've ever experienced that. Do you have in particular any advice that you would hand down to younger dads when it comes to how you handle anger or frustration, whether it's with your kids or your wife or both? Just, I feel like it's a major category that fathers in particular can get quick to anger.
Yeah.
Do you have something that you would point towards?
Well, here's one piece of advice I'd give you: never hit your kids in anger. I've never actually hit my kids, and the Bible says, "Spare the rod, spoil the child," and I don't ha- have to hit my kids. When I raise my voice, they are fearful of it, and I've never had to hit them. I'm not saying that you're a bad parent if you spank your kids. I mean, I commend people that can do it. I just could never do it. Um, if you do anything like that out of anger, it's going to be not good. I really value somebody that can spank their kid by going, look, here are the rules. If you break the rules, this is what you get. And then they break the rules and you do it in a cool head and you're like, look, I'm sorry, but what are the consequences for what you just did? And
Yep.
they're like, I get a spanking? Yep. And it's that old saying, it's going to hurt me a lot more than it's going to hurt you. But I can really commend someone that can spank their kid and not have any anger in them at all. So that's one thing. Um, I think when you're young, I was a hothead. I mean, like I said, I came from an Italian background, and we're yellers and screamers and throwers, and I just I think I know when to walk away. And it's really weird because Jen's the type of person that when I walk away, when I withdraw, which is kind of like get my bearings, get refocused, she wants to follow me, and she wants to, and I'm like, look, I need this time. We joke about it now because when I get mad and walk away, she'll come running, and then we'll both look at each other and start laughing because we just know,
Yeah.
right? Um, if you have a temper, the biggest thing I'm going to say is you need to pray through it, man.
Hmm.
Because whenever I go through things, I just go to Him and I go pray, or I read my Bible, or I go to church. Those are the three biggest things I'll tell you guys as young guys. Find a church, read your Bible, and pray. Don't ever stop those things. And it's not, I go to church on Sunday. I guess I'll read my Bible on Sunday night I mean, it's a it's a thing that you do all the time, and to have a relationship with God is you're constantly in communion with Him, right?
Mm.
And you have to ask for wisdom. You just you just have to constantly, and as young fathers, I mean, it's hard sometimes, right? Sometimes you're like, man, I mean, we talk about all the great things about being a father, but the things that are hard is like I'm responsible for these. I'm the financial person for these little ones. Um, and as they start they need cars and college money and all that stuff. You're just constantly going, man, it's such a, it might feel like a burden at times. So you got to pray your way through it. And Jen, just the other day, she goes, "Are you praying for Reagan's husband?" And I'm like, "Absolutely, I'm praying for Reagan's husband. I'm praying that God puts the right person in front of her path, and I'm praying that Jaden's gonna find the right person. And I constantly have to be praying all that stuff.
Mm.
When you stop doing it, and you think you can do it on your own, mm-mm.
I can attest to that. It's interesting. Every day when I would go to work, I would pray in my truck before I walk into work. And throughout the day, like if I was getting frustrated, I would just be in conversation with God that I shouldn't be, that God will help me calm down, that I shouldn't be thinking this way or reacting this way. And just with the hustle and bustle of the baby, since she's here now, I forget to be in constant, since I'm in the comfort of my home, I forget to be in constant conversation with the Lord throughout the day, especially when it's getting tough and she's not stopped crying. So I like that. And
Remember this verse though. It's not by our power or our might, but it's by the Spirit. Because you're gonna you as men, we're just constantly trying to like figure everything out. Like, right? I gotta
mhm,
do this. I gotta do this. And sometimes I just like lay it down and go, I can't do it anymore.
mm,
I can't do it. I'll run into a problem at work, like a big problem, and I'll just say, God, I can't do this. I'm sorry. I've exhausted myself. I need your help. And it gets done.
mm.
I've got plumbing things that I've done where I've tried to fix people's plumbing and I was in a hole and I couldn't get the fittings to work and I'm like, God, I can't do it. It's beyond my skill. And I'd take a break, I'd pray through it, give it one more try, zing,
Yep.
done,
Yep.
out of there.
I love that.
And and then I say, thank you, Lord.
Hmm.
That was not me. It's not by my power or my might, but it's by your Spirit.
How do you set your how do you set your priorities of work and family? How do you differentiate them, prioritizing your family over work?
Here's how it goes, Caleb. God, Jen, kids, church, work. That's my priorities.
Yeah.
Um, I'm blessed to be a business owner and could come and go whenever I want, right? It doesn't mean I work less. I mean,
Hmm.
I just have, I'm in a position where I can shuffle things around. Like maybe I'll have to come in and do this, but I'm not going to miss my kids' history fair. I'm not going to miss my kids' basketball game. I'm not going to miss Reagan, you know, her volleyball game in Florida. I'm not going to miss those things because I don't get another shot at them.
Hmm.
Okay. So I always have to prioritize that. Um, Sometimes I almost put my church above my family, and Jen has to reel me back in. She's like, hey, don't forget, don't forget the order.
Mm.
God, you know. So that's how I prioritize that.
Yeah.
That's super cool. So part of one of the things that we want to do on this show is we want to have an exit question.
Hmm.
And this exit question is going to be your number one piece of advice that you'd like to say to the next person who will be on the show. And this is ideally going to relate to fatherhood. Now, your piece of advice came from Nate, and I know you know Nate, and his piece of advice related more to the studio. So he just said for his piece of advice that it's tight and be ready for the space. That's what Nate handed off, but it was a little bit more of a teaser joke for Nate. He was the first one.
Oh, so you want me to give advice to your next guest?
Yes, but in terms of, we didn't specify it well enough when we did it with Nate. We want it to relate to fatherhood. So we want you, unknowing who the next person is, to just hand off a piece of wisdom, very direct, and we're going to say it to him to kick off the next episode.
Okay. And if I don't say this in the format you guys want, we'll have to do a second take.
Okay, sounds good.
Here's one piece of advice. Whether you stay married or not, I mean, hopefully people stay married, but sometimes they don't. But whether you do or you don't, you can't badmouth your spouse to your children. And here's why. Half of their genetic makeup is from them. So when you say your mom is a beepity beepity beep, you're basically saying you're a beepity beepity beep.
Hmm.
Okay? I know people that are divorced and they're like, your father's a scumbag or your wife's a so and so. And it just drives me crazy because I'm like, look, you can't ever badmouth your spouse because that's badmouthing your kid.
Hmm.
I mean, if anything, maybe you do believe that. Maybe you believe that your ex-spouse or even your current spouse is just a slime ball and you can't do it. You've got to find the good in them, right? Because that's going to highlight the good in your kid. And I just hate when people do that and I just see kids just get cuz it doesn't matter. There's there's good in everybody. Um I love this thing. if we're chasing after God and the devil's chasing after us, what's going to happen when we stop chasing after God?
The devil's
That
gonna
will
catch
catch
up.
up. Yeah.
Yeah. So if anything, just know that maybe if your father or your mother or your spouse, your kid's father or mother, your spouse, maybe they just, maybe the devil just caught up to them. Okay. It doesn't mean they can't outrun the devil and catch back up to God. So you got to have grace with your kids, even if the spouse isn't the best spouse.
Hmm.
D- does that work for your next guest?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
we love it. We appreciate the advice. This has been incredible getting the chance to sit down and interview you, Mike. So I just want to say thank you for
It's
your
an
time.
honor, you guys. I love what you're doing. And um, like I said, man, I am so far from perfect. You must have really had a hard time finding guests to call me up.
No,
Oh, you were great.
You were
Yeah.
early on my list. You were early on my list.
I do have a personal kind of question for both of you guys, and we can fit this in the podcast wherever. I've been experiencing with just my wife and I, we're pretty close. We don't argue, and if we do, it's like it's shortly lived. We get over it pretty quick. But recently, just with the baby, I feel like we feel more spiritual warfare and spiritual attack. And it's kind of tough. Just with like getting on each other. Obviously, there's lack of sleep. But did you guys experience that?
Yeah, I mean, when we started early on, it Jen and I's marriage was just, it was hard.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to figure it all out, but you know what? We also walked away from God.
Mm-hmm.
There was a moment there where we were like, in our heads, we were like, yeah, we're kind of not going to church right now. We're trying to find it. And we were kind of hodgepodge. And the real answer was we were too lazy to go to church.
Mm.
We just were. And it's really easy. And then once you stop going to church, okay, remember my analogy about chasing after Jesus? Then we start going to church less, and then we start reading our Bible less, and we start, not praying as much. And then guess what happens? The
No.
enemy is out to kill, steal, and destroy. There's your spiritual warfare, Caleb.
Yep.
Right? So my advice to you is you guys got to dig in, man. You got to get into the word, and you want to raise your kids loving Jesus. I mean,
Yeah.
I told you guys my number one job is to keep you guys safe. No, my number one job is that you love the Lord with all your heart. Okay? And I'm so blessed that my kids love Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my daughter is out saving souls at the age of 16. She'll go to a homeless person, and her and her friends will buy them lunch and read Bible verses to them.
Hmm.
Okay? It's 16. You know what I was doing at 16? Different show.
Yeah.
Different show. But you know what I mean? So my advice to you, I mean, it's great that you recognize that,
Yeah.
but man, get into your church, read your Bible, and pray together. I mean, grab your wife's hand and say, "Hey,
Yep.
can I pray with you?"
And I told her that I was like, we're starting and ending our day with prayer, babe, because
Yeah.
this is getting out of hand. This is not like us.
And
And you hit the nail. Full transparency, you hit the nail on the head with that, because our attendance at church has been very minimal, time in the Word very minimal, and prayer obviously it's been low, but
God wants all of your time and your talents, right?
yeah.
I mean, He just wants that. And man, we went like almost a year without going to church, and our whole lives were falling apart. I thought we weren't going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And I look back now and I'm like, it is so easy. But if you read your Bible from the second Adam and Eve was born, that's how we are as humans, right? We're sinful, want to go our own way, want to do our own thing. I mean, we've got this great book. We had the 10 Commandments. I mean, and the Israelites were never happy with God. I mean, right? They God would do a miracle and they wanted to see another miracle. Jesus would do a miracle. Well, let me see you heal this
Mm-hmm.
It's just I mean, that's what faith is. We just have to believe and we have to get in there. But if you pray as a family and you have your kids pray, I mean, that's the greatest. In your marriage, I mean, I think I always tell people after a while, the devil he's like, oh man, I thought Caleb was going to be a slam dunk, man. But I'm going to lower hanging fruit. I'm going to go to this person over here and he gets off your back. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I will tell you this. You're going to be doing the happy dance soon because you got to pee. But I will tell you this. I'll tell you this real quick. My daughter got baptized. She made the decision she wanted to get baptized last year. And everything went wrong the second she got baptized.
Yep.
It was horrible. Her whole world came crashing down. And I couldn't figure it out. And I'm like, God, why? And then it was an epiphany. I'm like, the devil is trying really hard to take her out. Because the devil's job is to kill, steal, and destroy.
Yep.
And he's like, this girl is almost on the light side. I got to get her over to the dark side.
Mm-hmm.
And she made it through, man.
Yeah.
She made it through, but it was tough.
I don't 100% agree with it, but I love the saying of like, Satan comes after you when he knows you're a threat. He leaves you alone when he knows you're not. And so the encouragement is almost the more you feel attacked at times, it's definitely a sign that at least God wants you, because if not, you wouldn't feel like you're attacked.
Right.
You
Yeah,
feel like
and
you're
do you
living
know
in the
people
world.
that are like atheists that you look at them and it seems like there's no problems at all in their
Nothing
life?
wrong in their
I've got a really good friend and I'm like, the guy just
Scoots through life.
yeah, but the devil's like, I got him on ice, man.
Yep.
That's
Mhm.
easy stuff. I got to go after
Yep.
yeah.
The people that have
He's gotta-
tickets to
he's
heaven.
gotta have
Yeah.
to try. He has to
Yeah.
try harder with us. My one thing that Hannah and I are learning, because we're in a very similar, the world that we're in particular gives us too many excuses. And I think that the reminder that Hannah and I have to have with each other when we're finding ourselves starting to pull away is that our relationship with God isn't dictated on what other people think is okay. It's too easy to use our kids as an excuse on why we're not in church.
Yep.
It's hard to take all three kids.
And
It's
you know
hard to get
what else you're gonna do? You're gonna find things wrong with the church. You're gonna go, oh, the coffee's not this kind. These people are too loud. The praise and worship's too soft. The drummer isn't hitting the drums hard enough. I mean, you'll figure it all out. And sometimes you just have to go, look, I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna open my heart to get fed. And there's things that I'm not gonna necessarily agree with, but I'm here and I'm in God's house.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's 90% of it.
Yep.
Do I think you should find a church that I think there's churches for different people. I don't think there's just in the Northwest here. I don't think there's just like, that's the church. Like Real Life is the only church and that's the only, I mean, I think Real Life is great. I think Compel is great.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one we kind of settled into, which was good for us. I think Heart of the City is great. I mean, they're all great, but you're just going to find one you're going to like. You're going to go to it. You're going to see things that you don't necessarily agree with, and you're going to put them on a shelf, and you're going to keep going. You're going to keep going with your family, and you're going to keep bringing your kids. And they're going to sing Jesus songs, Jesus loves me, this is I know, right? And that's it, man. You're doing your job.
Yeah.
As a father.
Awesome. That's super cool.
Sweet.
Well, Mike, one more. Just thank you for your time.
Yeah,
we
thank
really
you.
appreciate your wisdom and advice here today.
You guys are awesome.
Look forward for the next upcoming episode, guys. If you had a piece out of Mike's interview that you guys really liked, give us a comment down below. Let us know what stood out to you guys today. Until next time, guys, keep
Keep fighting the good fight.